All right, it's 11 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get I'm Holly Gummel with Ezra. I am moderating today for Gary Dickinson of Tripoli, Vice President of Tripoli. He's going to share with us today best practices for successful high-power certification flights. We will have a presentation and then a quick Q&A session at the end. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat channel, and we'll address those at the end.
Holly, thank you very much. Greetings, everybody. As Holly said, my name is Gary Dickinson, Vice President for the Tripoli Rocketry Organization, current President of Tripoli Mid-Ohio Prefecture here in Ohio, and I was a prefect for approximately 15 years for Tripoli Mid-Ohio. I know just a little bit about certifying. So I've been doing high-power rocketry for about 24 years, and I've seen a lot of things. So my co-presenter, Elaine Russell, is unable to make it here due to a family emergency. So I told Elaine I would have this covered. So best wishes to her and her family right now. So the first step that you want to do on the certification journey is to join either Tripoli or the NAR. And the best way to do that is to go to the Tripoli website for Tripoli, contact a local prefect about how to go about this and about getting a group of students through the certification processes. I'm very familiar with this with the Ohio State University and some other universities here in Ohio. It's not difficult. We love to have our students come out and certify with us. We just want to be sure that we're going to be able to accommodate everybody that's there. So prefectures can be found on the tripoli.org website. There's a world map there. Find where you're located and go from there. Membership for students is $10 per year and includes insurance for launch activities. Insurance, that's a big thing. The hobby of high-power rocketry is fairly safe. We have a very, very good safety record, but things do go wrong. And in the event that they do go wrong, there is insurance. Be advised that there's a $2,500 deductible that the flyer of record is responsible for. So a lot of times that can be handled through the university or through the club on campus. So level 1 certification. Each certification must be done as an individual effort. This is to be done not in the assembly line method. So the person going through the certification needs to be very, very close attention to this and getting this done. Keep your certification builds and flights simple. A lot of times students will want to complicate their first level certification by adding all kinds of fancy electronics to it. Don't do that. Get the rocket up, get it down, get it certified, and go on. For level 1 and 2, motor ejection is absolutely fine. You don't need to worry about altimeters, although a lot of students do. Level 1 requires an H or an I motor. There's more detail about that on the Tripoli website. Become very familiar with Open Rocket, RAS Aero, or RockSim. You're going to want to build your rocket and put it into the assembly program, put a motor into the rocket, and launch it in the simulation to see what kind of performance you're going to get. When you show up at a launch for a certification, the launch director is going to ask you, how high is this rocket going to go? And I don't know is not an acceptable answer. We have a tendency to breathe funny when students tell us that. You can also get an idea of how far away it's going to land by looking at that. So I'm kind of partial to RAS Aero. I do all my rocket designs in SolidWorks and then simply transfer the dimensions into RAS Aero, but this is your choice. Plus, RAS Aero is free, as is Open Rocket, and I think that there's a student fee for RockSim. It's been a long time since I've been a student. So going to launches. As a former launch director for Tripoli Mid-Ohio, we would always get inundated with groups of students coming. And the groups that we really, really liked would contact us ahead of time to let us know that they're coming. Large groups have a tendency to overwhelm launches. Most of our fields here for regional launches are small and we have limited facilities. So if we know you're coming, we can direct you to carpool or to make special arrangements. Check with the launch director where you should park and prep your rockets. A lot of launch sites and clubs have very specific rules about how to behave and how to enter and exit launch sites. The site that we fly on has about a half-a-mile long lane, and we have asked students and participants not to speed coming down that lane. We get a lot of people think they're on a racetrack, and that's one thing that will get you uninvited from our launches. The other one is we fly off of farm fields, and the farmers have requested that we do not park or drive in the fields. That's the other thing that will get you uninvited, because those fields are those farmers' source of income. Any damage due to soil compaction is going to affect their income. So bring your Tripoli or NAR cards with you when you're going to fly. Be prepared to show it at check-in. When you go through the procedure, they'll want to see your card. You want to be sure your certifications are updated. Everything's good to go. As I said before, simulate your rocket before you go and be prepared to answer questions about your rocket and your proposed flight. We want to know where the aerodynamic balance point is, or the center of pressure. We want to know where the physical balance point is, or the center of gravity. And there needs to be a specific relationship between those two. If the launch director asks you for these and you say, I don't know, he's not going to be happy. He may send you back to go figure those things out. Be considerate of other flyers in the prep area and try not to do anything that would interrupt them while they're prepping rockets. Prepping a rocket is can be a very, very daunting task, and you're going to run into things environmentally like wind, insects, dust, and people are concentrating on getting this rocket ready to go up. So you want to be mindful that there's other things going on. So. Well, congratulations. You've made your level 1 certification flight, and now you're officially into the high power world of rocketry. Welcome aboard. Level 2 requires one J, K, or L motor. It is highly recommended that you build another rocket for level 2 and that you have some additional flights with H's and I's before you attempt level 2. Why is this? A second rocket is going to expose you to a different set of problems in building and putting the rocket together. Typically, the bigger the motor you get, the bigger the rockets are. So when you get to that level 2 rocket, you're going to be putting a bigger motor in this. Anytime that we change letters, we go up a letter, we double the basic power of that motor. So you're going to have a bigger rocket. It's going to need to be stronger, and it needs to be able to handle the thrust of that motor. The other thing would highly advise is to get a mentor. The mentor can be a student that's previously been through the process. Talk with a local prefecture and ask them for help. It's nothing to be ashamed of. There's a lot of ins and outs specific to this hobby that you're not going to see in the world of aerospace engineering. Yes, it is rocket science, but there are some differences. If you can't keep motors on campus with you, you can have them sent to your prefect or TAP. Also, some campus advisors will take care of energetics, such as black powder and the motors. Talk to them. Trackers are not required for certification, but are very helpful at many fields, especially on the East Coast because of trees. A story I'll relate happened a number of years ago. A student from Ohio State University was doing her level 2 certification on an Aerotech J350 in a very light rocket. The simulation put the rocket someplace around 5,500 feet. She was doing this with motor deploy, which meant the main chute came out at 5,500 feet above the ground. They watched the rocket drifting across the countryside and thought they were able to track it. They spent 3.5 hours and still did not find the rocket. So after the launch, one of my friends and I were sitting here talking about it, and we said, we have a line on that rocket. And we went out, and within a minute of parking our truck, walked right up to it. The other thing you want to do is talk to people who have experience in visually tracking rockets. They can give you some pointers. They can teach you how to line up on line of sight. Also, if you're tracking a rocket that's gone off from the field, be sure that when you stop to enter on somebody's property that you knock on the door and ask for permission. Most of our neighbors know what we do and are very, very happy with us, but we want to be sure that we don't make anybody unhappy by trespassing on their property. And if you have a landowner that won't allow you on, to go back and talk to the launch director or the prefect, and they'll make arrangements to get your project back. Resources for student teams. One of the nice things about collegiate rocketry is you're not operating in a vacuum. Tripoli.org is a Tripoli website. There's a lot of information on there. Elaine is the chairman of the outreach committee, and they have a page for resources for teams and for mentors. You can contact the Outreach Committee Chair for assistance in finding a TRA mentor in the U.S. and parts of Canada. We're still working on mentorship for teams that are overseas. It's still in its infancy, but we're working on it. So you can also find contact information. As I said, I'm Vice President of Tripoli. I'd be more than happy to talk with you. My contact information, I believe, is still on the website. Just a whole source of resources on there. Go back. Holly, I am done with the presentation and willing to take questions.
Okay, don't forget everyone, please put your questions in the Q&A chat window to your right. While we wait for those to come in, Gary, how long have you been with Tripoli?
I have been flying rockets at high power for about 24 years. And I started off and did my level 1 certification in the mud, and came back about 90 days after that and did my level 2. And I was on a journey with this, and it took me about another 2 years to get my level 3. At the time, I was traveling a lot on business for Procter and Gamble, and and at that time, our motors, anything above a certain class, you had to have a low explosive users permit, and was in semi-constant contact with the ATF, which was a lot of fun too. So, but we've since won the lawsuit, which is a really good thing. Now you don't need to have that little pink piece of paper hanging in your house or your office. So, okay, Andy Berger.
Yeah, so Andy Berger asked, how do you so the rest of the group can't see the questions, so I'll read out the questions to make sure everyone knows what you're answering. Andy Berger asks, how do international teams find TRA mentors?
Andy, we're still working on that. It's a little difficult. We've even struggled finding mentors in Canada. And as interest in the spaceport continues to grow, we're seeing prefectures, new prefectures pop up almost monthly. There's one in Mexico. We're looking at Costa Rica. So there's some things that can be done virtually, but in a lot of cases, as you know, I am myself a mentor. I want to put my hands on the rocket. I want to look at it. I want to look at the inside and see how things are. So all I can do is say, stay tuned.
All right, great. Joseph Moore asks, is there a minimum number of high power flights you would recommend before attempting level 2, or maybe special milestones you would recommend achieving? Specifically, I hope to try for L2 this year, but I just made L1 2 months ago.
My suggestion is, obviously the first one is to build another rocket. The second one is you want to begin to fly. Most of the flights that I've seen for level 2 have been done on a J motor, J350 from Aerotech, a very, very popular motor. And I think CTI has something very, very similar. But start moving into the range of K motors and even L motors. And as you begin to get bigger motors, get into using electronics. Altimeters, very, very simple altimeters. Perfect Flight makes a wonderful altimeter for about $60. It will give you an exposure to how to set up for dual deployment. So, and the higher you go, the longer you're going to have to walk. And if you're east of the Mississippi, those walks usually include things like trees and drainage ditches, which are a lot of fun to negotiate. So the closer you can drop that rocket to the pad, the better off you are.
Gary, just to let you know, Perfect Flight, it's almost impossible to get a hold of one of those. I'm tracking them on a daily basis. There's, I guess, the chip
I've got so much to
somewhere.
Probably sell. Let's put it that way.
You could make some money there. But there are still a lot of really good, very inexpensive flight computers that are out there. And so, do your research, ask the questions. The HeroX forums are a perfect environment that you can jump on and ask fellow teams as well as rocketry experts. But Tripoli also, TRA, if you're a member, you have access to their forums. And that's where you get the really senior gurus that can help you in multiple facets. So use those resources, use the internet, and you can find some good flight electronics.
Yeah, I'm very, very partial to Marsas, both the 33 and the 54, and also to the Raven. But those are getting into well over $100 a piece for those, but love them both.
All right. Next question. Peter Tarl asks, what do you advise students to do specifically?
Ain't answering that question, Peter.
No,
Sorry.
no.
I know Peter, so it's just like.
All right. I just missed that one.
Yeah, we know. Andy and I both know Peter very well.
All
so.
right. Ariana Asila says, I have a NAR level 3. How easy would it be to convert it to Tripoli? Are there benefits to NAR in Tripoli?
It's very easy. All it is send a copy of your NAR level 3 card into Tripoli headquarters, and they will send you a TRA level 3 card. The big advantage is if you're getting into Tripoli allows the member to make their own rocket motors, which is a whole nother discussion outside of this arena right now. But that's the big difference. So.
All right. And then Ethan Taylor says, do you have any advice for getting a level 3?
Yes. Fly lots and lots of motors as level 2. Ks and Ls especially some of the bigger Ls. Be sure you understand dual deploy. Be sure you understand your electronics, what works, what doesn't, and what kind of problems you're going to have to solve. And then go ahead and follow the guidelines on the Tripoli Rocketry Association site for level 3, which means contact a TAP member. If you have problems contacting a TAP member, let me know. My contact information is on the Tripoli website. One of the biggest issues that we run into is seeing students, not just students, but people show up with a rocket that's built for level 3 and saying, okay, I want to give you my certification. That's not how the system works. You need to have a plan approved by 2 TAP members before you proceed with construction. So it's not that hard. Yes, I do. Holly, is that Casey's?
Yeah. Do you?
Yes. Let's answer that live then.
Okay. All right. Casey asks, do you have any recommendations for students on what materials their L1, L2, L3 builds should use, i.e. fiberglass, PF, blue tube, etc.?
Hi, Casey. Hope you're doing well. Yes, I do. Level 1 cardboard is fine. If you're not going to go deep into the hobby, cardboard, phenolic. PML has Public Missile Works has a wonderful range of kits that they have a composite plastic airframe, which is good. Level 2 would suggest possibly getting into fiberglass. I know that there's a number of good fiberglass kits out there that they hold up well, and they'll take non-perfect flights a lot better than some of the cardboard world. For level 3, would definitely recommend fiberglass. Carbon fiber is an option, but as you go into that material, you're going to drive up the cost. Of course, you're going to drive the weight down. I have built blue tube rockets. I like them. Relatively inexpensive. The material has a tendency to, to draw moisture and swell in some cases, but if properly sealed, it'll work just fine. So, I hope that answers your question.
What is a blue tube?
That's one I'm not familiar with.
Blue tube, it's a Andy, help me out here.
Oh, it's essentially a type of resin impregnated fiber, or what you call cardboard. So it's sort of halfway in between a regular cardboard tube and a fiberglass tube. But they have a special formula for it. It doesn't stand up to water too well. So if you're in a wet environment, probably not the best. Much better than cardboard, but not as good as fiberglass. But very strong and fairly light and fairly inexpensive. When you hit the fiberglass and carbon fibers sides, the cost per foot go up exponentially, similar to the motors almost. As you,
Yeah.
the bigger the motors, the double the cost.
If you look at the little picture of my little of me here standing next to the rocket, that's a blue tube rocket, and it's held up very well, and it's been way past Mach with no issues at all. So
Great. That's all the questions I have in the Q&A, and personally, Andy, do you have anything else for Gary?
No, again, guys, I want to thank everyone for attending this, and I want to let everyone know that that the certification pieces in our partnership with Tripoli is critical to the future of the event. In years past, ESRA has sort of run under the radar to a certain extent. Now we've got, with official support and following the TRA safety code, it's put a lot of new requirements on many of the teams, but it has improved safety dramatically. And so, some grumbling here and there is more than sufficient to the benefit of the safety that we're having to this point. So, we can't thank Tripoli enough. The safety code is absolutely our Bible, and we're going to continue to drive on it in the future. And so, the second benefit, and this is a major benefit, particularly to ESRA, is the insurance that it provides. And so, for the solids, for the commercial, the COTS solids, and the SRAD solids, in 2022 will be the very first year that these teams will be flying under TRA safety code as an official TRA sanctioned launch with TRA insurance included. I want to make sure that everyone here is aware that there is a deductible that is involved with that insurance. Gary, I believe it's $3 million liability coverage.
we have $3 million primary coverage. The flyer of record is responsible for the first 2,500. If you have a rocket that comes down and lands on somebody's garden shed and causes $500 worth of damage, the flyer is responsible for that. Anything above $2,500, Tripoli will begin then to pay for that. So,
yeah, to try to explain, I guess, a little bit of the differences between the ESRA has always had insurance covering the landowner as well as covering the volunteers and staff involved in it. If there was an incident and a student was held accountable for the incident, the student's parents, even potentially the school the student went to, could be open and liable to that type of liability. And that could cost a lot. It could cost, from the expenses, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that this provides is some liability coverage for that. So
that's correct.
It is super important and very, very valuable for that. I think for the year 2022, this next year, Spaceport Cup, again, the coverage is going to be focused in on the SRAD solids and the SRAD, the COTS solids only. Hybrids and liquids will be in a separate area, quite a bit away from the others, almost in separate launch type opportunities, but still be within the competition framework. I think we will continue discussions because we've already had a lot of people asking questions about, doesn't TRA insurance cover hybrids? And the answer to that is, well, yes, they do. However, we have to segregate that launch. Right now, the way we have it designed at the Spaceport America vertical launch area, the hybrids and liquids launch in very, very near identical spaces. We have to segregate those physically to allow the hybrids to be covered, and that is something that we just can't do overnight. And even though it's over a year away, it is still going to take a significant amount of time, money, and construction, essentially building roads, clearing land, etc., to get a specified hybrid launch area available. So there is a potential in the future that hybrids will be included in on this. But as far as any time in the future, the bioliquids are still not going to be covered. And at this point, from the teams, they need to be looking at providing their own liability insurance for that in at least the the next who knows how many years.
Yeah.
But at this point, there's no options I'm aware.
Yeah, this is new territory for Ezra and for Tripoli both, and you and I both know the gyrations that we've gone to get the memorandum of understanding in place. I'm going to take a sidebar here. I think we had a question from Rick Maschek on level 1 and level 2 certifications.
It's in the answered section.
Do L1 and L2 rockets be done with kit rockets?
No, they do not. I did my level 1 on a kit. I did my level 2 on a kit. I just watched a young man from the University of Louisville do his level 1 on a scratch built rocket. If the student understands enough about the design and manufacturing process, by all means, knock yourself out and do a scratch built rocket for level 1 and level 2. In fact, I would prefer to see scratch built rockets for level 3. But they've changed the rules a number of years ago. I'm just one of those crotchety old men that likes to go back to the old school ways of doing things. So
there's also another question or comment. Might want to advise people on how to approach taps and what they're looking for. It usually sets people back.
When approaching a tap, it's best to do it before your project even started. You're going to need to have a lot of flights underneath your belt at the level 2 level, J's, K's, and L's. Be sure that you have a solid plan in place. Try to find TAP members that are local to where you plan on doing your launch. In some cases, that's difficult to do. Be transparent with your TAP member. If they and understand if they tell you that you don't have enough flights, you don't have enough experience, take that to heart. Don't take it as offense, but take it as feedback, and ask the TAP member, "What do I need to do?" As a TAP, I'm not here to criticize you or send you away. I'm here to help you because it's important for me it's important for you to be safe, number one, and successful, number two. So the taps are supposed to be we're supposed to be the best of the best of the best, as they say. So we want you to succeed, and we want you to be safe. So we are very, very cognizant of folks that kind of come up and they just got their level 2 certification last week and they want to build their level 3. Not enough experience. The more rockets you fly, the more experience you're going to gain. The more you're going to understand what can go wrong. And that's very important when you step up into the next range of motors that you understand this. We see a lot of people, not just level 2s or not just students, but people get their level 2 and they want to turn around and get their level 3 immediately. And once you have that level 3, you can fly some big motors, some big commercial motors, the O3400 series and the O's from Cicerone and the O5280X from Aerotech are just a couple of examples. And to go from flying a J motor, J350, to go flying a big O motor, that's a huge jump. And we want to be sure that you're doing this safely.
And for those that might not know, what is the TAP stand for?
Technical Advisory Panel member. So, and typically what happens is to become a TAP that you need to be nominated by your local prefect and by 2 additional TAP members. So,
and also there needs to be a need for the TAP in the area.
Yep.
So if you have an area, for example, where the closest TAP might be 300-400 miles away, and you've got 4 or 5 people trying to do L3s, it might be an opportunity to request that type of arena. But if you're interested, if you've been an L3, if you think you've got the experience, you're interested in doing it, certainly doesn't hurt to submit a request. But if there are already 2 or 3 TAPs in your area and there aren't a lot of level 3s coming forward, that request is probably going to be declined, and it has nothing to do with your skill set. It just identifies that there's not really a need in that specific arena. So that is important to keep in mind. One thing I wanted to add in when we were talking about kits versus scratch builds for L1s and L2s. And Gary, I know you and I have talked about this before.
mm-hmm.
We've had scenarios with universities in our local prefecture, and it's probably happening elsewhere, where there's almost an assembly line type of
Yes.
situation where the maybe the requirement for the club is if you don't have your L1, you can't really compete on the team, or you can't be active as a lead, or whatever the case might be. And so we'll see what happens is these students will show up, and there'll be 15 or 20 of them at once, and they will all essentially be almost identical scratch-built rockets. And they might, but in the essence, when you start asking them questions like, did you do the carbon? Did you do the fiberglassing? Did you do the layup? Did you install the electronics? And start asking them the harder questions, and they're not able to answer them. The same. The focus on your level 1 and level 2 certifications, and even your level 3, is this is your rocket. This is your design. This is your simulation. This is everything. If you find yourself putting in a motor because that's what the team told you to, and you don't understand what that motor is, or what it's doing, or what the delay is, if you can't answer those type of questions, we're likely going to start turning down these certification requests. So we don't want it to turn into a factory assembly line. And it doesn't happen everywhere, but we're starting to see it more and more as the bigger teams push for level certification.
Yep, it's a good point, Andy. Thanks for bringing that up.
From that question, is limits as to what size the teams can be at different levels? So I imagine at some point you've got 200 people on a team. Can they all get certified for that level? At some point you're not getting your hands on the rocket enough.
Yeah, I've seen some university teams that have just a handful of folks, and again, I reference back to Ohio State University. They've got a rather large team, and they'll bring in 4 or 5 students a launch to get certified, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, their Tripoli advisor is actually pushing to get them certified, so that they understand this stuff. So I don't think there's a limit on the number of students that can come to get certified. It's more about the launch venue when we have 50 or 60 students descending on our field. It gets a little tight for space. So
if I can add in there, a great example is Purdue University. They have literally hundreds of members in their rocketry club, but they split them out in basically experience and expertise, in such that they'll have 5 or 6 different competitive teams in different events. They'll have a Far Mars team, they'll have an IREC team, they'll have a SEDS team. And to get on any of these particular teams, you may have to need a level 2. You may need to be at least a junior, whatever the case might be. So when you have the larger teams, it's obviously most wise to segregate the younger members from the older, more experienced folks, and then allow them to move up from team to team as they get further along in their expertise, certifications, and education level.
And I've heard a lot of faculty and TRA advisors say that, I've lost my team. They all graduated. So we constantly need to be looking at building competency and building knowledge within the team. So that's a perfect way to do it, Andy. How we doing on questions, Holly? So
I think we've gotten all the ones in the Q&A section. Oh, wait. Yep. I think if more questions, we can probably go ahead and call it time and end our session today.
Okay, very good.
Oh, Fred, I forgot to launch a poll. So there are 2 polls up there. I don't know if anyone's actually responded to those, but if you could, that would be great. Good info for us.
Ooh, I see a question.
Yep. Isaac Sims says, any best practices to convince faculties to spring for the costs of certification, especially looking at level 3 certification? We're beginning to impose a pretty stiff financial expectation from members.
Wow, Isaac, that's a fantastic question. I don't have an answer to that, but I think I know somebody that can a couple of people that can probably get an answer for that.
I've had to field that a couple of times. You want me to take that one, Gary?
Yeah, please do, Andy. Please do.
Okay. All right. Speaking to department chairs, faculty advisors, mentors, et cetera, the dollar value is always a challenge. The department has a certain amount of money, maybe your student activities organization, wherever the group that funds your organization, whether it be through your own engineering department or through a student activities fund, you're going to be limited by how much money you're allowed to get. And quite often that won't include funding for any type of certification process. You cannot start it overnight saying, I need $11,000. That's how much it's going to cost us. You've got to start it small and you've got to build up the value add to it. One of the things that you continue to highlight is, what would a certification actually do for an individual student? Well, I can tell you for one thing, when you're going to a SpaceX interview, I can tell you your 3.9 GPA probably got you into the interview. But the first question they're going to ask is, okay, you can study books, that's great. What's your hands-on experience? And when you start highlighting, well, I'm a level 1, level 2, level 3 certified, maybe I have my ham certification, maybe I have all of these other capabilities, you'd be surprised at how important knowing how to weld is from a SpaceX world. You may actually be doing some welding, but the matter that you understand the welding process, you understand all of that, it's going to be critically important to how quickly you progress through those interviews to actually receiving a job. So highlighting that and making it known that this is something that goes directly on a resume. This is absolute value add. The second thing, do not simply sit back and say that's the only group of people I can get money from. If I could highlight some of the Base 11 Space Challenge teams, these are projects that start at about $250,000 and go up. They have, here's the best way example. I don't know if any of y'all have seen this before, but we have a large number of sponsors for ESRA. Big companies, the Raytheons, the Boeings, SpaceX's, all of these groups, and we put them on these banners, and we love parading the banners around. It's amazing to me when I see a high-power rocketry student team from a university that has a banner that looks better than ours. But that's where they actually come in and they say, we've got a small team dedicated to going out and getting money from these organizations. If you can highlight that value add, how does it help the students? How does it get them into the industry faster and more capable? That's all you really need to sell. If it comes down to that versus the underwater basket weaving scuba team, you're probably going to be able to request a little bit more money. So my 2 cents on that, and usually by the end of that conversation, I have a department head that's going like this. He's pulling his wallet out and he's getting ready to hand you some more money. So, angle it that way. Put yourself in their shoes. They've got the money. Why would they give it to the rocket team versus, the Baja Overland Desert Challenge team? You've got to sell it that way, and you got to take small steps. Don't ask for the whole enchilada up front.
Yeah, and getting industry sponsors is not that difficult. Those industries have an investment in these students. They are going to be, seeking out these students. They want these students to have these experiences because it's going to make them more qualified for the positions that they're looking to fill. It's an investment for sure. You have
Questions if we have time?
Good. Yeah.
Since a level 2, you can make research motors. Can you get your level 3 with a research motor you build?
No. According to Tripoli Research Safety Code 7.2.1, a research motor shall not be used for certification flights.
All right. That's clear cut. Ethan Taylor asks, any advice for convincing university to allow research motors?
My advice would be this, is to find a competent Tripoli motor maker and work with them. I'm doing that with the Ohio State University. There's some folks here in Ohio that are doing working with students. University of West Virginia has a wonderful mentor, and they're doing motor making in this man's shop. The problem with universities, they're usually situated in a populated area, and that's not really a good venue for making rocket motors. Work with the Tripoli motor makers that have been doing this for a while and use their facilities. They know the procedures, they know the safety, they know the PPE. they can do it that way. That'll get you the experience, and you don't have to put the university in jeopardy. Now, I do know of a couple universities that are doing this. I'm not familiar with how they've gone about to allow that to happen. I know that their facilities are fairly extensive, probably rivaling some of those, such as ATK. But I don't know that the university would be willing to do that. Again, your best bet is to find competent Tripoli motor makers and work with them off-site from the university.
And one thing I can add, to, I guess, specific to that arena, do not forget about your university's environmental health and safety team.
Yep.
Two things that will bring credibility, and that's what you're talking about. Students coming forward to a department chair or to a faculty advisor saying, I'm going to take all these chemicals and I'm going to throw them in a mixing bowl. Then I'm going to add some, powdered metal to it because that always works out well. And, I'm going to mix up my own little rocket motor because I watched a YouTube video. You're going to get pretty much walked right out the door and maybe even security picking you up later on. That's not the approach you want to take. You want to make sure that the advisor immediately brings you expertise. So Gary is absolutely on the money. The teams that have been successful, from my experience, have started off with that advisor role. The second piece of it is having environmental health and safety on your side, maybe standing behind you, nodding their heads. Yes, we've reviewed all of this. We have all the safety documents ready to go. We understand the processes and all of that. That is going to give you tremendous amount of credibility when you go to the folks that say yes or no. Without that, you're probably digging a hole for yourself. So certainly environmental health and safety. And the greatest thing about this virtual event that's going on right now, and Gary was an expert commentator on it, but we have environmental health and safety advisors from around the country, university-based advisors, attending a session, an all-day session today on learning about high-power rocketry, learning about SRAD solids, learning about hybrids and liquids as well, and some of the dangers and what things so they're being educated and trained and brought up to speed on these kind of things. This is an opportunity where you can reach out to your own university and say, hey, we're really starting to get in on this. We really would like your help, but instead of us trying to force you or trying to educate you ourselves on all of this stuff, here's a great opportunity here that you can reach out to some of your co-workers, as your peers in the industry, and get up to speed really quickly. And then you have resources to ask when we come at you with questions you don't know how to answer. So make sure you reach out to your environmental health and safety folks and try to get them linked in with the rest of the high power rocketry community.
That's great advice. Yeah.
I saw another question come through that I really wish Drew Nickel was on this call. So it was
A little bit of a tangent on research. While we're talking about it, would it be acceptable for a level member to act as the flyer for a research hybrid that has capacity to be level 3 impulse class, but is only filled to L class for that specific launch? Happy to clarify more in the chat if that didn't make enough sense as a question.
It actually made perfect sense. I'm not a hybrid expert, but I am thinking if there was a way to verify that it was filled to the hybrid level, that it would be fine. Andy, you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, on the hybrid side, it's fairly simple. I mean, there should be some type of load cell under it, and that's how you validate whether the rocket is full or not. And so if there's a load cell under it, and they know that through their simulations and such that this amount of weight equates to an L class motor, absolutely. But let me throw a big but in there. That person that is being your flyer of record, if that person you just happen to tap on the shoulder at the launch site has no knowledge whatsoever of that rocket, that is not going to work. That person is taking full responsibility for any incident that occurs to that. I myself would not sign on for something like that.
I would not.
In the world, I'd sign on for being a flyer of record for something that I've never even looked at. If I've never flown a hybrid, and I've got some hybrid experience, but not anything significant. I would absolutely want to see everything about that rocket and take that as a grain of salt. So you need to make sure that long before you get ready to fly that rocket, you've got that person, that flyer of record, lined up for you. Now, again, if this is an individual's rocket versus a team's rocket, I understand the team challenge. But the level 2 certification is not that hard to get. I would focus on doing that or finding someone that can mentor you so that they can be the flyer record versus again the last case scenario where you go tap somebody on the shoulder at the last second.
Well, Andy, to that point, I am the flyer of record for Iowa State University on a couple of projects they're doing, and I've demanded to see everything in detail that they have. And when I go to be with the launch with them next week, I'm going to go through that rocket from top to bottom to be sure I know what I'm getting into, because I wouldn't sign off without total disclosure of what's going into it, how it's built, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So.
All right, that is time. It's 11:45. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to find Dickinson on the event. You can contact him directly. You can also go to tripoli.com, tripoli.org. Correct?
Yep. Very good.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you, Andy, very much. Very
All right.
much. Thanks, folks.
Good session.
Everybody.
Yep. Bye-bye.